Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Sunday Chats. Episode 10. We're in double digits, finally. However, I'm not a very happy chappy because I am making a video to talk about, as actually to be fair, quite a lot of people seem to be in favour of. I put out like a little poll on the Snapchat story before doing this, and a lot of people, 31 if memory serves, out of 36, wanted me to talk about this topic. People would like to hear about the Online Safety Act. Now, maybe this is old news, maybe I am a bit behind. I don't know, because I've sort of, for an embarrassingly long amount of time, stuck my head in the sand on current affairs, but people asked for me to talk about this. I've done a little bit of research, mind you, not a lot. So if this is your only source of information, don't let it be. Please go and find someone more appropriate to give an answer on this. But here are, from what I can find, the main sort of issues with the Act. Now, I just knocked something on my desk. I am crossing my fingers that this doesn't get me gulagged. I'm joking, obviously. Hopefully it will never get that bad. But I mean, you know, there's a serious concern about this one, given the nature of what the Online Safety Act is claiming to be against. There's obviously a lot of stuff that I can't say by name. There are certain sites that are banned that I obviously cannot name drop, for example. But I'm still going to talk about the Act, and I hope that you guys can sort of understand what I'm trying to say from what I'm saying. That being said, I suppose we should probably get into it. And if I look down, it's because I have my notes on my phone, just to clarify. Because I did a little bit of research before doing this, and also this is, I guess this is just general housekeeping stuff. This is the first Sunday Chats I'm actually recording on a Sunday in quite a while. I'm recording it a few hours before it comes out. So, you know, the clock's ticking me. I've just been quite busy. I've been working, I've been going out. So I haven't really been able to do the research, so I haven't really been able to make the video. Apologies all. That being said, let's get stuck in. Okay, so there are, as I have found, at least sort of 5 gripes that I've got with the Act. 4 of them about how the Act works, and 1 of them are about the sort of political implications of it. But I'll save that one for last. Also, if my voice sounds a bit scratchy, I've just come back from band practice, so I have been singing, and therefore I've lost my voice a bit. It was very quiet this morning, so yes. Anyway, the first one of these is simply that a lot of... I think my mum's just coming home, I can hear the dogs yapping in the background. If there's a sudden cut, it's because I've gone to say hi to her. Okay, so the first serious issue with the Act seems to be that there are a lot of sites that are restricted, or things that are restricted that shouldn't be. I haven't got much noted down for this, but some things that sort of I've got here. I will confess that a lot of this is other people have ran into this. I haven't really ran into much in terms of restriction, because I've mainly just been watching like philosophy videos on YouTube and going out and meeting people. I haven't really been doing much restricted stuff. YouTube doesn't seem to have been that changed, and I've been going outside, so yeah, maybe not the best person to talk about this, but just a few things that I've heard, and I've done Googles as well to sort of double check this, is that certain artworks have been restricted. Certain like sites talking about artworks have been restricted due to the artwork having, you know, for example, genitalia on it. And the same with like Greek statues and Roman statues as well, which is quite comedic that the government seems to think that that's how people are going to spend their afternoons. At least that's what they think about Greek and Roman statues. I said the government, I'm pretty sure it's Ofcom that's doing the regulation for this. So, yes, I don't know what that says about the Ofcom regulators, but that's not what I think when I see a Greek or Roman statue. Um, Video games, apparently, there have been like age verification things for buying like 18s, which, I mean, let's be honest, people under 18 buy 18 video games all the time. The fact that that is, as far as I'm concerned, silly. And one of the more harmful ones, it seems, is that a lot of sort of sites for sexual health seem to have been restricted, which might be useful for hopefully not very young, but sort of growing and developing people. And yet that's seen, because the overall subject is that, it's seen as it's seen as something that should be restricted. And yes, I think that there are definitely things that people shouldn't see at a young age. There are things that I wish I hadn't seen at a younger age. But a lot of these restrictions feel rather arbitrary. I said rather in two different ways. That makes it look very complicated. That's I'm rambling. Forgive me. Point is, the restrictions seem quite arbitrary, and it seems very unlikely that they'll be lifted that often. I mean, it's appealing the process of a regulation via Ofcom is quite a lengthy, I have no doubt, expensive process, and what is it? The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology apparently stated, and I'm reading this off of the notes that I've got, on the 26th of February, that Ofcom had designed its codes of practice to be as proofed against judicial review as possible. Basically meaning that their codes are very sort of, they have a way of wiggling out of most things. So it seems that Ofcom really does have a lot of freedom in what they regulate, which makes it kind of impossible to challenge, which at first should be causing people to question the free speech issue on this. Like, it's such a cliche, I'll admit, but ultimately I think free speech is a very important thing, especially online. We've seen that it can be very harmful, but we've also seen it can be very beneficial. And I mean, we've now got sort of completely arbitrary seeming regulation of the internet. One I find quite funny is it seems that you need to be over 18 to edit a Wikipedia page, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there are a lot of people that edit the Wikipedia pages are silly, but the fact that they think that there's sort of a cut-off point where people start editing Wikipedia responsibly, or, on the other end of things, a point at which, you know, it seems that someone who's 17 and a half cannot know something and want to add it to the site. But I digress. The second thing, and this is also quite an overstated point, the first few are probably going to be overstated, but at the end of the day, if the news has been talking about this for a week, what can you expect of me? The ID situation and who gets the IDs. I believe, and this is keyword believe, that under the original Sunak government, the plan was that the government would look after the IDs themselves. However, in the implementation, and maybe I'm wrong on that, and if I am, forgive me, because I heard that from somewhere. I think it was a mate of mine, but I may be wrong. But now, it is up to the companies to choose, like, age verification websites or companies to store the IDs with. And that sounds great in theory, cutting costs. The government doesn't need to have a bunch of databases, which is an option, even if it's not what the Conservatives wanted. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it doesn't change it from being a thing that could happen. So yeah, okay, we save money, spending less taxes, or we can even cut taxes, who knows. However, right, we are giving our photo IDs not just to the companies that we want to use the sites for. No, it's worse. That's just the middleman. We are giving our IDs to companies that are chosen by these other companies to look after our IDs. So you can do your research, but let's face it, the average British media consumer will not do their research. And this bill claims to be advocating for not the hyper-vigilant, because ultimately they will be able to protect their children from, you'd hope, to an extent, the things that you can find online. This is not here to protect the hyper-vigilant and the people that are very tech-savvy. This is here as a bill to protect the less tech-savvy. The less tech-savvy, or the parents of the less tech-savvy, or the children of the less tech-savvy, rather, I suppose. But the point is, the less tech-savvy, and I very much include myself in that, will not either be bothered or be able to do anything with the information that they receive if they decide to look into who gets their information. A lot of it's American companies who seem to have had a lot of data breaches already. It's something that the consumer has really no serious control over, which you'd hope they would. And it's also an incredibly risky process, because over the last year we have had no shortage, and by we I mean like the world, of data breaches. A couple of UK ones actually, and the fact that we have seemed to have not learnt our lesson from those and insist on giving these third-rate, quite poor reputation companies our literal IDs, like passports, I believe, and things, is a great concern. I mean, it only takes one or two breaches and like half the country's boned. So, yes, those are the first two main concerns. I'm just going to take a quick pause and drink break, and I will continue speaking in a moment. Right, I have returned. The next real gripe that I have is that the Act seems... Let me check something actually. Okay, pardon me, I just wanted to quickly research something before speaking so that I wasn't speaking out of my backside. Although I have no doubt I possibly still will in this video a little bit. I want to clarify that I'm not a tech expert or anything, man. Last time I did anything STEMmy was like or computery was computer science GCSE. That was a year ago now, and it was never really my specialty. This is more of a matter of principle than a matter of specifics. But it seems that the Online Safety Act, and maybe I've got this wrong, is forcing companies to scan messages before they are encrypted and then sent onwards. I don't know if people are familiar with end-to-end encryption. As I understand it, you send a message, it's jumbled into code, not like actual ones and zeros, but like some sort of encryption thing. So like some, I don't know, watch the Imitation Game and get back to me. It's encrypted, it's sent on, and it's decrypted, which means it's turned back into normal messages. That is a very short version of end-to-end encryption. And the idea is that in the meantime, nobody screws with your messages. It's a privacy thing, okay? Because that is supposed to be a virtue, or supposed to be a right, is that you are entitled to some form of privacy. And certain companies, such as Apple and WhatsApp, are, and Signal is one that's I've heard being thrown around a bit recently, especially after this has all come out, are quite pressed because they are basically being asked to scan messages to check for harmful content, which, might I add, is a rather ambiguous term that can definitely be amended by future governments, which is why there's a concern about having privacy breaches in the first place. You know, there's a whole sort of slippery slope argument. You give people an inch, especially if they're the government, they'll take a mile. But basically these companies are having to scan to check for harmful content. At the moment it's meant to be like stop minors from getting diddled, but which isn't, I want to clarify, the aims of the Online Safety Act are not unknoble in of themselves, but it's one of those cases where the question is whether the ends justify the means. Yeah, and there's this the argument is basically that if you scan people's messages before sending them off, it's not really end-to-end encryption. It's not proper end-to-end encryption, because you have you have the messages available. It doesn't just, it's not stuck between two parties. There's now a third party involved. The whole point of end-to-end encryption is that there are really only two parties: the person that's messaging and the person that's receiving the message. And the government basically wants, like, people like WhatsApp to create records and things, and they're taking them to court over it, I believe. I don't know if it's finished, but there's definitely like plans to take, or there were plans to take legal action against the government. And that's a huge sort of privacy breach, because maybe this is a modern entitlement, but we've gotten relatively entitled to the idea that we can send messages to someone, and unless people, get through our phone, and there's not really that much they can do about it. We've sort of become very accustomed to the idea in Western society that when we message someone, it's between us and that person. Same as if I was to speak to you in just a room. If you were sat on my bed over there and we were having a wee chit chat about this in the flesh, you would expect the same level of privacy. I mean, the same is to be said with letters. If you were to send someone a letter, you would consider it as a huge breach of your privacy if that letter were opened. And the government would need reasonable justification to be checking people's letters before allowing them to be sent. The government would need reasonable suspicion to place a bug in that little cupboard there if you were sitting on that bed and we were having a chat in person. And so why there is this exception for scanning messages, I mean, yes, it makes it easier for bad actors, but that does not mean that you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. And a lot of people are saying that this act is essentially doing that. It is of serious harm to the notion of privacy in private exchange. It is forcing companies to abandon the ideal of end-to-end encryption, which is one of their big selling points for a lot of these companies. And yeah, I struggle to see, I seriously struggle to see how that can be anything other than yet another infringement on privacy, which is supposed to be sort of a fundamental right. And so if we're willing to backtrack and say actually rights can be suspended for the sake of dealing with a modern society, then well, if you're going to take that stance, fine, but let's see what the electorate thinks of that one. Okay, maybe using strong terms towards the end there, but you used the point. Basically, end-to-end encryption is being challenged, and that's quite a concern. That being said, gonna have a pause and a quick drink again, and yeah, we'll get on to point 4. Oh, didn't press pause. Apologies. There we are. Okay, the next serious, questionable part of the Online Safety Act is it seems to place quite a lot of restriction on online social media communication and how that should be conducted. And it introduces, and this is according to and this is also where I got the quote from the Undersecretary of State for the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. This and that are according to the UK Constitutional Society, which is a website. You can look them up. I find a lot of their stuff rather interesting because I'm quite interested in sort of public law and UK constitutional law and how that all works. It's this lovely spot in between sort of politics and human rights law where it's a bit theory and concept heavy, but there's still sort of there is an application to it. And it stays within UK as well, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think that geopolitics is boring or anything, but I'm more interested in internal politics generally. So public law is that nice sort of spot where it all works out. And so yes, I'd recommend the Constitutional Society UK, but that's so besides the point. There is now going to be what is called, pardon me, I'm just going to double check, I was looking at the wrong bit, a false communication offence. Okay, George Orwell. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, all of like the, oh my gosh, it's literally 1984. Like, I'm over exaggerating a bit, but that doesn't mean it's not a concern. You know, you can. There's a world in between the two extremes where we're not. We're not becoming a country from 1984. We're not becoming a dystopia, but it's still. That doesn't mean that it's perfect either. But the offence has, and I'm quoting this directly from them, which is why I'm looking down. I hope you'll pardon my rudeness. The test for this offence has 4 elements. A person sends a message. I'll count my finger. Person sends a message. The message conveys information which that person knows to be false. At the time of sending, the person intended the message or the information to cause non-trivial, which I suppose is quite an important thing to state, non-trivial psychological or physical harm to a likely audience. The person has no reasonable excuse for sending the message. That is all sort of well and good, I mean, it's preventing people from convincing people online to kill themselves, for example. That is probably quite a good thing to try and put a stop to, right? However, there is vagueness around this, and this is sort of, I don't know exactly how it will work in practice, and this is one of those things where common law will decide how it goes, which is all about precedent and how courts write a lot of the law under a doctrine called precedent. And if you want me to explain that, leave a comment. I haven't left many opportunities for people to leave comments for their suggestions so far today, so leave a comment if you want me to explain precedent and how courts actually write a lot of the law, and it's called common law, and it's a big thing in this country. But I think it's going to be very hard to determine what people intend to cause with their social media posts, because let's face it, a lot of social media works under like layers and sometimes layers upon layers of irony. Like social media communication, people will pretend to be someone else for a giggle, or they will just be like taking the mick, potentially, of their own sort of ideals. Sincerity on the internet is a very hard thing to find, and so I think Your Honour, I was only joshing. They're either going to have to take that quite often and accept that quite often, which will be quite hard to, which will make it quite hard to get any convictions under this, or they will basically just have to, you'll need to provide some sort of proof or something, and I really don't think that will work. I think if people are asked to prove that they were just being a silly, goofy little guy, then we're going to have a lot of sort of unnecessary convictions. I think that what counts as a reasonable excuse for sending a message, that sort of comes under it, but there's a lot. I'm realising reading this now, I'm going to double check something, because I'm not actually certain whether this article was quoting the law directly. So I'll be right back to just quickly check the law, and I'll get back to you. Okay, what I read out, what it says on the Constitution Society website, is indeed the wording of the law. So again, the message needs to convey information which the person knows to be false. At the time of sending, the person intended the message or the information to cause non-trivial physical or psychological harm. I think I combined a person sends a message and conveys information that knows to be false in the same thing. They're two separate things technically. And then the person has no reasonable excuse for sending the message. Again, that's available on the Constitutional Society website. It's also available just on the legislation website under section 179 bracket 1 of the Online Safety Act. So yeah, that's the sort of criteria. Also, what's interesting is the definition of a what was it? What was the term used? Likely audience. The definition of a likely audience, and I'm going to be sort of spaced out because I'm going to be looking at my computer as I read this, is quite vague. is either that it's reasonably foreseeable, which I don't know what probability that includes, that the individual would encounter the message, or that in an online context would encounter a subsequent message forwarding or sharing the content of the message. That all seems like a lot of, oh, it seems like it might happen, therefore we're going to lock you up, which is a concern. And also, what's concerning about this is that people don't fact check everything. Like, if we look at the Southport riots, a lot of this was due to people not doing their sort of due diligence. But people, not everyone that shares the facts, not everyone that shares the idea that the attacker was an immigrant, not all of them were doing that to cause misinformation. A lot of them were doing that because they thought it was true. And yes, they should have done their research, potentially. But it doesn't change the fact that they thought it was true. I think it's going to be quite hard for courts to prove whether or not people know things to be false. And so I think the scope, and also like things like the idea of harmful content as well, there's this sort of strict definition, which, I mean, you know, Ofcom's pushing what that definition is at the moment with their regulation of websites, but there's sort of a vague idea of what that means, but it doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. What we consider harmful content now, there could be layers upon layers of rules and regulations added to that, to the point where it is really quite hard to make a lot of things on the internet. I mean, and it gives too much. That is the problem. It gives too much. It gives too much to very often people like Ofcom, who are not really responsible to the electorate. In the case of this, it gives too much power potentially to the judiciary, to the police. It gives too much power to people that aren't accountable, especially people that aren't accountable by popular vote, or by, like, the election system. I mean, we don't really have popular vote, we don't have first past the post, but we have, we don't have proportional representation rather, but we have an election system. It gives too much. That's why lots of people don't like it. Now here is a concern that I've got. The Online Safety Act was brought in under Rishi Sunak's government in 2023. It is now come into effect under Starmer in 2025. And also the majority of people that hate this bill, this act rather, are younger people. With the Conservatives gone, with Labour gone, you've got Reform, spoilers, you've got Lib Dem and you've got Green and whatever Corbyn's doing. I haven't looked into that yet. You've got Lib Dem and you've got Green, but how successful are they going to be? Look at trends of who the youth are supporting. A lot of young people are supporting Reform. This is just, it seems, giving another easy win to Reform. And that's concerning. I personally, look, I'm going to be open here. I know, look at me, I'm being so controversial when I say this, but I'm not a fan of Reform. I'm quite sceptical of a lot of what they've got going on. And this just gives them more as well. This gives them more sway with a younger electorate, who, might I add, will be able to vote in the upcoming general election. So, you've given 16 and 17-year-olds a vote, and then you've pissed them all off. Even if you didn't write the original bill, you've now pissed them all off. So, yeah. I fail to see how this can really end any other way, given that the Conservatives are also responsible. Then a huge boost for Reform. And that should be, in my opinion, a concern. I'm just going to say a bit of a downer. This whole thing's a downer. This is not a good video. This is not a nice video because it's criticising a piece of legislation that's going to come across as critical and a bit grumpy, maybe. But that, ladies and gents, that is my 2 cents. 2 pennies, not a yank. That is my 2 pennies on the Online Safety Act. Please let me know if I've misunderstood anything. Obviously. And if you have any refutes to what I've said, let me know. Because ultimately, this is quite a pessimistic stance that I've taken. And I don't mind a bit of optimism in my life. So, if you think it's all going to be okay, tell me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting the apocalypse by 2030, but it feels like another slow bit of the wall protecting us from unnecessary interference and regulation, and at one point maybe tyranny has been chipped away. And that is my sort of final, slightly poetic statement. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed, especially because this was quite highly requested. And I will see you all next time. Toodle pip.